Welcome to Prophetic Perspectives on Current Events. And as always, there's plenty to talk about, but sometimes I like to go a little deeper and not just talk about what is happening and what we expect to happen, and there are times to do that. But there are also times where we go and we try to understand why are things happening. And, I know there's a lot of people that are crying out and claiming that a lot of the natural disasters, for example, are caused by climate change. And, it's interesting to me that, when we were having the big hurricanes, the Katrina and some of those they seemed like bigger and worse than ever, and they said it's all climate change. There are going to be worse storms and everything. And then we went through right after that, the longest period in history of no major hurricanes, none. And I said, well, where'd climate change go? I mean, if climate change is making them bigger and stronger and all this, what happened? Did climate change go away? But you understand that sometimes I think these make us look silly, but there's one sure thing that we're given thousands of years ago and told why these events come. I'm talking about the warnings that the Lord gave us through his prophets, beginning with Moses and on, that this is going to be the result of your sin. If you turn from following the Lord and you start calling good evil and evil good and honoring the dishonorable and dishonoring the honorable, these are going to be the consequences. And it talks about storms, it talks about earthquakes, and it talks about fires coming upon the land and burning the land. So I think, this year we were approaching spending about $1 billion a day in America, just America, almost $1 billion a day, headed towards, it was 300 plus billion a couple of months ago in natural disasters. And that is getting worse every year. And I think the only one who has discernment on why this is happening seem to be the insurance companies, who they're the only ones who call it. These are acts of God. They call them acts of God. They really are. You say, well, is America under judgment? Of course we are. In fact, the scariest thing of all would be if we were not under God's judgment, because he disciplines those whom he loves, and that he is still judging us, that he is still disciplining us, that we are receiving the penalty of the consequences of our deviation is evidence he has not given up on us. It's evidence that he still loves us. And but you see in Scripture a progression of the severity of God's judgments. And he does, he prefers mercy over judgment. But judgment is his mercy when it comes. It's not meant to upset us. It's meant to wake us up to what is happening and to turn from our wicked ways. And the land cries out, because of sin. The land cries out because of the shedding of innocent blood and other things that we talk about, that the earth itself cries out. And it talks about the shaking that these things cause. And we're told in Hebrews 11, there's a time coming when everything that can be shaken will be shaken. But we have a kingdom that cannot be shaken. So if we built our lives on the kingdom, if the whole world is shaking, we should be just full of peace and joy in the joy of the Lord, because we have a kingdom that cannot be shaken if that is what we're building our lives on. So now, I really believe strongly, and because of the scripture and the biblical warnings, that we should care about the environment, and that we should manage and be good stewards of what this incredible earth that the Lord has entrusted to us. Of course, I want to do that. But I think that all of this, if we are a sinful, wicked people, we're going to become a greedy people. And a greedy people will destroy the earth and anything else or anyone else if it feeds their greed. And so we have to deal with basic sin as the only way to deal with ultimate problems that are affecting the environment and everything else. Now, the last couple of programs I discussed some of the main counterpoints that have created a division in the land. Some people think we're in the most divisive time in our history. That is far from being true. I don't even think we've quite gotten to the level of division and chaos that was created in the 60s that I was a part of. And I thank the Lord for that. But there are things that divide us. There are points and counterpoints. There are cultural and social fault lines, not just natural fault lines, and when things shift, they're disruptive. They cause spiritual, social, and cultural earthquakes, you might say. Things are really shaking. And some of those we talked about last week. Two of the big ones are globalism versus nationalism. Now, today I want to talk about just some of the real basics between liberalism, what is liberalism, and conservatism. What is the difference between a liberal and a conservative? And why is there this clash between them? Now, I do believe that an eagle does need a left wing and a right wing to fly. I think it's a positive thing that we have people with opposite positions, opposite opinions. The real problem comes when the discourse becomes so uncivil and so bitter and outraged. If the more mature we are, I think the more we can dialogue about such things. But right now, it's more yelling than listening. But I think the divisions are actually a way of highlighting the factors and issues that can lead us to a greater unity. And as I shared last time, I think God's unity, and I think the only unity that ultimately works is a unity of diversity, not a unity of conformity. That's not what we're seeking. I don't think the unity that we're seeking in the body of Christ, in the world, in politics, or anything else is a unity of conformity. I think we need the diversity. I think God didn't make us all the same. He made us all different, made us all unique. And what we need to do is first learn how to coexist and start building bridges of trust and listening to each other, listening to those who have counterpoints. But liberalism is what founded our country, the U.S. Do you know that the Patriots, who wanted us to have independence from the British Empire, from the United Kingdom, they were all liberals. And most of them were in the Northeast. Most of them were centered in Boston, that is still one of the most liberal parts of our country. That's their heritage up there. And the conservatives during our Revolutionary War were the ones who wanted to remain loyal to the British Empire and a part of the British Empire. And you know, much of the Revolutionary War, you could say the Revolutionary War was the first Civil War. We tend to think of it was the colonists fighting the British soldiers. Do you know there were battles, major battles, like the Battle of Kings Mountain? It's very close to where I'm sitting. The Battle of Kings Mountain, there was only one British soldier on the entire battlefield. It was basically the Patriots versus the Loyalists. They were all colonists fighting one another. The officer in charge of the Loyalists was the only British soldier on the field of battle that day. So, you know, it was to a large degree a civil war. About 30% of the colonists were absolutely resolute on independence, having independence from the British Empire and becoming our own nation. About 30% were the loyalists who were absolutely committed to remaining faithful to the king and to the British Empire, remaining apart. And many of the soldiers on both sides were colonists fighting colonists during that war. Now, there were about 40% of the people that could go either way. Either didn't have an opinion, weren't sure, and they would tend to drift from one side or the other depending on who was winning. And it was only at the end, basically the colonists were losing, the Patriots were losing until the last battle of the war. Well, actually, Yorktown was not the last battle. There were a few battles fought after that, but until Yorktown and the surrender of the British Army there under General Cornwallis, the colonists had only won a couple of battles and had lost many, and yet prevailed in the end. Now, what is the difference between liberalism and conservatism? What are the main points of distinction between them? You know, now what I was trying to say there, I know I'm speaking to mostly conservatives. Most of the people who watch our show and listen to our show, I've already made liberals mad. They've left, they've gone away. And so I understand that. But what I'm trying to do is say we need to understand our history and our heritage was really founded. Liberals did this. They gave us our Revolutionary War and they gave us our independence. It was them. So maybe we have a reason to appreciate them more and understand that if this eagle's going to fly, we need a left wing and a right wing. So when we come back, I'm going to share some of the most basic details on what the distinctions are between liberalism and conservatism. I'll be right back. We have an incredible harvest special for you. We just had a couple of conferences back to back. I felt like the clearest word, maybe the most clear trumpet call I've ever heard come out of any of our conferences, came out of these two together. And without collaboration or anything, every message built on the other messages. And we had some of the most incredible speakers. We had Daniel Kalinda, who's now, taking over for Reinhard Bonnke and Christ for All Nations, one of the great evangelists, incredible. Two of his messages were just off the charts. We had Jeremiah Johnson, Todd Bentley. They brought their A game, and then some. Then Lou Engle. Lou texted me after, he said, I don't know I've ever felt that anointed. He was just, to me, Lou is always incredible, but this went to a new level. Then we had a KBA conference, Kingdom Business Association, a week later. And it was like part two of that message. It was like nobody collaborated. None of the speakers in the KBA even knew about, or I don't think knew what was going on in the Harvest Conference. It was like they picked up right where that left off. It was Ed Silvoso. He was one of the best I've ever seen him, and he's one of the incredible teachers. Lance Wallnow, same thing. Bobby Connor, Dave Yarnes, myself. Of course, we spoke in both conferences, but this was an unbelievable message. So we put together this Harvest special. My book, The Harvest, came from a 2.5-day prophetic experience. I wrote it in 1987, and published it in I think I wrote it in 88, had the vision in 87, published it in 89, Visions of the Harvest, many other visions I had related to the harvest, and all of a digital download of all of those messages from the conference that would be a retail of about $69. We're giving you the whole thing for $35 and including the shipping, no charge for shipping on domestic orders. This is going to change your life. You need to get the Harvest Special.
If we are going to be we the people, we got to hold our Congress their feet to the fire.
All of those people in Congress work for us, not the other way around.
Well, we have to have the courage to speak truth and to understand we're going to get ridiculed. Our Constitution was put together and designed as a device that limits the power of government.
We're not going to lose this great republic that we were entrusted with, and that so many paid such a price to preserve. It will not be lost on our watch. Well, we just began talking a little bit about, leading up to talking about the distinctions between liberal politics and conservative politics, and there's liberal theology, conservative theology, and there are degrees of both. We need to understand that. But basically, the way liberalism has evolved and what it is presently, it is generally one that puts a lot more trust in the government to fix our problems, to provide for us, and take care of us, basically. And it's been increasing degrees of this. John Kennedy, our President Kennedy, was considered extremely liberal in his day, but if he were alive now, he would be right of many of our conservative politicians, if not most of them. He was very much against what has become the welfare state as we know it. It's one of his probably most famous statements was a shot at the welfare state. The mentality of the welfare state when he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And so these things have evolved. And I think generally the center has moved pretty far to the left over the last few decades. Now, there are times in our history when it's shifted to the right now, and usually after a big shift to the left, there's a counter shift back to the right. Now, conservatives, liberals don't believe a lot of things conservatives think they believe. A lot of people, we tend to think in extremes, and we believe that all liberals are Marxist. No, they're not. Not all liberals are even socialist. But, if you keep moving to the left, liberalism goes to socialism, and that you keep on moving, you go to Marxism and communism. That's that direction. Now, the conservatives, what they believe is that we need as little government as possible. But, what we don't, what conservatives don't believe that many liberals think they believe, they don't believe that we should not take care of the needy and things like that. They just don't think that the government can do a good job of that, and that's, to me, a pretty proven factor. Decades ago, it was over 30 years ago, a study was done, one of our government agencies, and they found that only $1 of every $10 given to that agency actually made it to the needs, meeting the needs that were the reason for that agency. 90% of the resources were consumed in the administration and bureaucracy of that agency, and only a tiny fraction was actually getting out and making a difference. And I think that kind of efficiency has grown dramatically in our government, and the bureaucracies have grown that much. Winston Churchill, he foresaw the age of great bureaucracies and foresaw them prophetically as being one of the greatest threats to humanity. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of people who are well-meaning, they're just not good managers. But, the conservatives, you look at the tax returns on conservatives. You can do this with our politicians. And some of the most liberal who want the government to do everything for everybody, one of our most famous, well-known liberal politicians today personally donated $200 last year to charity. $200. You look at the counterparts on the conservative side, they are the most generous people. They give generously. And many times what liberal politicians tend to give to charity and to helping people. So it's not a matter of whether, it's not conservatives being mean and not wanting to help people in need. It's just we don't believe our government can do that or should do that. Now, there are other distinctions. Conservatives believe we should be moored to the Constitution, that in general, most of our problems today and even our major crises are the results of disconnecting from our Constitution that was a document of such profound wisdom that any government, to the degree that we've complied with the Constitution, we have prospered dramatically as a nation. And the liberals tend to believe that, no, it's a living document. When they say it's a living document, it's how we interpret it, not the way it was intended to be interpreted, which means we can make it say anything we want. And, but, if we did not know God, if we did not have our hope and faith in God, who else could we trust in but the government? As poorly as it's run and bad as it is, who else? So I don't believe we can blame the liberals for wanting to put their trust in government, and I think what we need to do is give them a greater hope. Where we live by faith and live by faith in God. He is our provider. Any government is going to disappoint us. Any government is going to make mistakes. I was down there at Katrina, after the Katrina hurricane, that devastation. Watch the madness that came out of the people, the insanity that came upon virtually all of those who were living on entitlements from the government. At first there was a terror that came on them when the government wasn't there to help them. You could see the fear, the terror, they didn't know how to take care of themselves. It was that bad. Government was always there. It was only a day or so later it turned into this unbelievable, crazy, insane rage. And I thought right then, this is the root of the lawlessness that the Lord prophesied would come upon the whole world at the end. The lawlessness was going to increase because it was a madness and an insanity like I'd never seen or never expected to see in this country. And it happened within days of a major catastrophe when the government was so overwhelmed they could not get there to meet the needs. Now, I think we're really wrong to expect our government to do that. I'm thankful for FEMA. I'm thankful for those who want to try, but we've got to be personally responsible. You know, one of the scriptures that talks about if we don't take care of our own in our own household, we're worse than infidels. And I think that is, you know, thank the Lord for the government, but as much as they may want to be there and help us, you can't count on them. Not in major catastrophes. There are things right now that are going beyond human remedy. There are diseases that are breaking out in different places, and the disease is evolving. And already doctors are saying the next mutation, and this is going to be a pandemic. It's going to be far beyond anything we can control. They're in virtually every area we're in over our heads and beyond human remedy. But guess what? We have a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And so the main thing we want to do is put our trust in the Lord, build our house on the rock that can stand the storms that are coming. Now, you know, there are other differences between liberal and conservative issues that we want to talk about a little bit. But, you know, right now, I think the main thing we need to do is start determining that we're on solid ground ourselves, that we're building our house on the rock. And that we have a hope, the hope in the Lord, it says, will never disappoint. And then we need to look at the people who are so fearful, they're putting their hope in the government of all things. And let's seek to give them a greater hope. Something greater than our earthly governments to believe in. We're thankful for our government. We're thankful for our leaders. We should be praying for them, supporting them, of course. But we put our trust in the Lord. He said, don't trust in horses. Don't trust in the flesh of men. You will pay a high price if you do that. Let's put our trust in the Lord. Thank you.
There's an emerging generation of miracle workers. We must prepare the next generation for the great harvest at the end of the age. Because ready or not, it's here. It's not even coming, it's upon us. And don't you despise the day of small beginnings. We want to see the established, finished work of the cross. We take authority right now. Loose!
On TV, online, on the go, and on your iPad. Tune into Prophetic Perspectives with Rick Joyner, always available on MorningStarTV.com.